Hello, and thank you all for joining us for the launch webinar for Oletha DeVane, Spectrum of Light and Spirit. I'm Rebecca Uchel. I'm Director of the Center for Art, Design, and Visual Culture, CADVC, here at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. In fall of 2022, we were honored to host the remarkable exhibition of the same title, Oletha DeVane, Spectrum of Light and Spirit, curated by Lowery Sims here at our university gallery. The book under discussion today documents this exhibition, as well as the extraordinary career of this important, visionary, and multifaceted artist who lives right here in the Baltimore region and can be seen sharing a square with Lowery Sims in the panel on view today. Oletha, can we get your full face on view to welcome you? Hello, Oletha. Before introducing Lowery Sims, who will then introduce our speakers, I do want to share some brief logistical notes as well as some words of acknowledgement to those who made this book and this day possible. Today's conversation is being recorded and it will be placed online as a contextual overview of the book. The book is currently available for pre-order on the Distributed Art Publishers website at artbook.com. A link to the pre-order site will be placed in the chat. You can also find that link on our website at cadvc.umbc.edu, where you may additionally download the catalog PDF to follow along during today's discussion, and the PDF link will also be placed in the chat for those who are viewing live today. Today, we will hear from 4 of the book's contributors. In addition to their contributions, I also want to acknowledge the work of Sims Gardner, former CADVC director, who is executive editor of the catalog, as well as book contributors Leslie King Hammond and Tadia Rice. Matson Gallagher, who joins us in the audience today, was the designer of this absolutely stunning volume. And it really is that, folks. For all the beauty that you will see in the PDF, it is even more so in the print version. It is absolutely gorgeous. I want to thank Joyce Scott and 2 anonymous donors for their support of this volume, as well as the Maryland State Arts Council, the Baltimore County Commission on the Arts and Sciences, Dave Ferrace and the McDonough School for their contributions to programs and activities related to the exhibition and catalog. The College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences Dean's Office also generously supported the exhibition proper. So many people and organizations contributed to or supported this exhibition that I'm unable to thank them all here, but a fuller roster of contributors are available in the acknowledgement section of the PDF that is linked in the chat, and we thank you all sincerely. Now it is my honor to turn the virtual stage over to Dr. Lowery Stokes Sims, who is a presenter and moderator of this event, as well as editor of the volume and curator of the exhibition. Dr. Sims is an independent curator and art historian, was exhibition curator and co-editor of the book we are discussing today. She will introduce the other contributors that are joining us. Thank you so much and welcome, everybody.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Can I have the next slide, Jason? Many of us who are attending here know that Oletha DeVane has had an extensive exhibition history. However, the real joy and discovery of organizing Oletha DeVane's Spectrum of Light and Spirit for the Center for Art, Design, and Visual Culture at UMBC in 2022 was the first opportunity to see the full range of her work. And believe me, I made her go into her attic and find things. Today, we will, as Rebecca said, we will feature the catalog for the exhibition, which chronicles that scope of her creativity. I'm joined by 2 of the essayists, Serubiri Moses, who's an independent writer and curator, who served on the faculty in art history at Hunter College and the visiting faculty at the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College, and Christopher Kojzar, artist and assistant professor at the University of Vermont. We also joined by, of course, the artist sitting next to me, Oletha DeVane, who's a well-known, renowned artist and educator in the Baltimore area. Now, what we will see as we go through this catalog, why don't we go to the next slide? Oletha's work is distinguished by its technical versatility and thematic scope. Over the last 5 decades, she has explored issues of identity, tradition, and ritual, finding inspiration in the stories and characters she's encountered as she has traveled in the United States and to Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. And to that task, she's brought a variety of media, prints, paintings, assemblage, installations, and video. So these are 2 pages that show a few pages that show the various aspects of her work and the installation. As you can see, it was a real challenge to sort of bring together so many different works, and I really just enjoyed the whole thing. Next one, please. And this is some scenes, some pages that are devoted to the activation of the sculpture Nkisi Woman Universal Nkisi 2021-22, which occurred during several events in the fall of 2022. Next, please. Now, the catalog begins chronicling DeVane's work in the 1980s and 90s with paintings such as Doorway to Nowhere from on your left, which shows an unseen figure casting a long shadow into a brightly lit, ornately appointed doorway. It is possibly a portal of possibility. And then Veils 4 is one of 4 from 2000. These are heads that are rendered in the Van Dyck print technique that conjure concepts of our singularity and oneness as human beings. We can see that DeVane is an incredible philosopher. Next, please. DeVane's work in the early 2000s also includes a number of still life paintings of elaborate, detailed florals with scenes of turmoil. In Red Tails, Tuskegee Airmen of 2003, we see an airplane and a view of an explosion from an aerial bomb. The title pays homage to the legendary Black Squadron of World War II. And then on your right, Through the Gates of Babylon, a lithograph executed the same year, refers to the invasion of Iraq by U.S. and Allied forces. Here, she combines and collages images of veiled women, a swath warrior, a desert scene, along with newspaper text. And it's this ability to juxtapose beauty, horror, personal reflection, and the unfolding of world events that can be seen as a metaphor for DeVane's personal philosophy and spiritual path. Next, please. These are 2 works that show how, as the 2000s progressed, DeVane's work begins to focus on a number of stories and events and personalities that have a significance for us. There is Henry Box Brown of North Carolina, who escaped from slavery with the help of a freed Black man and a white slave owner who shipped him in a box to Philadelphia. And then Hagar's Dress on the right, in her exile, deals with the biblical story of the Egyptian slave who was the handmaiden of Sarah. As DeVane reminds us, the story of Hagar resonates with generations of Black women who struggled to hold their families together. Both works feature prickly sweet gum balls, which she often had us go pick up on the streets of Baltimore, which are ubiquitous in the Middle Atlantic states over which Black Americans trod in their flights to freedom. Next, please. The quintessential Maryland heroine, Harriet Tubman, is featured in a series of solar etchings from 2017 and 2019. In these images, DeVane adapts an 1868 photograph of the freedom fighter, which came to the attention of the art world in 2017. In Harriet the Raven, Tubman sits in a miasma of leaves and sweet gum pods and ravens. And these birds, which also are featured in many works, DeVane considers as guiding spirits that symbolize the oracle, the intelligence, the courage, and singularity pursued by Tubman, and who is really a kind of really important local hero. Next, please. So the catalog also chronicles a striking group of images from 2009 and 10 that feature a back with scarification marks. They draw us into the ambiguity that such images can provoke in the viewer. On the one hand, as we see on the far left in 19th century photographs, of the backs of whipped slaves, these were instrumental in bringing home the brutality of slavery to a larger public. On the other hand, as seen in Out of Africa, uh, From Beauty to Pain, these marks also allude to practices of modifying the body as practiced in Africa to designate relationships to specific communities, life status, and even beautification. And then the one on the right, tattoo scarification series, refers to contemporary fads among people now of all races for body modifications that include tattooing and branding. Next one, please. We're really just getting a kind of brief look at everything that's in the book and in the exhibition. I wanted to highlight Beyond Bars, which is another project documented in the catalog. This was conceived by Tadia Rice and DeVane, working with women in the Community Correctional Center in Kailua, Hawaii. The project included brief interviews and photographs of the participants, which are all formatted in a direct view with two profiles facing left and right to represent the present, the past, and the future. And I just threw in, for your edification, the references to the three-faced Greco-Roman goddess Heke, who is the goddess of crossroads. Next, please. Now, between 2017 and the present, DeVane has been involved in the creation of large-scale personifications that really go between sculpture and painting. I have dubbed them avatars because they represent alternative identities and materializations or incarnations of deities on Earth. These wall pieces are festooned with beads, shells, glass, wax, plastic, resin, other substances. We see in these two from 2018 that feature the Haitian Loas or deities Dambala and Erzuli. Next, please. Two other avatars from 2020 include Subsumed by Whiteness, where the character is framed by a lacy halo, even as he wears a neckpiece of bullet casings. It's an apt metaphor for the social resistance to gun control all over the United States. And then on your right, you see the Lot tree, which is inspired by Islamic lore. It marks the utmost boundary of the seventh heaven, across which no one can pass except the Prophet Muhammad. Next, please. The highlights of the publication include the body of work for which DeVane is best known, her spirit sculptures. These are built around ordinary bottles and are inspired by a Haitian bottle that DeVane acquired from her friend, William Rhodes. They can comprise found ceramic elements or constructed containers, also transformed by the application of sequins, beads, clay, wood elements, fabric, shells, resin, wire, glass, porcelain, and even bullet casings. We won't say that Oletha's a hoarder, but she's close. She conjures such mythological figures such as Janus, as you see on the far left, and there are also more lighthearted figures such as a Lady of Means, which features a flirtatious figure of an 18th century lady whose bottle dress becomes a Rococo confection atop a classicizing candlestick. Life is But a Dream on your right is a pink version with a plastic Cinderella figure at the apex, very into like the Barbie aesthetic. And it presides over a cake confection held by blue-black male figures at the base. Wonder what's going on there. Next one, please. And then we also see more overtly political aspects of DeVane in George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and I Can't Breathe, both of 2021. They capture the sense of horror and sorrow that erupted that year as the Black Lives Matter movement reflected the crescendo of anger and frustration that erupted and had been building over the last decade with each successive instance of a violation of the human rights of Black people. And last one, please. Perhaps the most personal of all these spirit sculpture is 12/20/2021, which is a poignant tribute to DeVane's late husband, Peter Kojzar. DeVane collaborated with Baltimore-based glass artist Tim McFadden to create this assemblage of found Meissen German porcelain vases, which is in a town near the region where people grew up, a small check bowl put together with McFadden's blown glass and vitrines and an embellished wooden base. When interviewed by Virginia Anderson, curator of DeVane's 2019 installation Traces of the Spirit at the Baltimore Museum, Oletha DeVane had this to say about the impact of her work. She expressed her hope that viewers would come away from the work with a sense of wonder. As she noted, I'm sure there'll be questions about meaning. I hope the pieces resonate visually and that people feel the energy from which they were created. So now I'm happy to cede the screen to our colleague, Serubiri Moses. Moses brings to the catalog a view of DeVane's work through the lens of African American forebears such as Alain Locke, Zora Neale Hurston, and David Driscoll. Serubiri.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lowry. Um, and and Oletha. In this audience, I should probably address you both as Dr. Lowery Sims and Professor Oletha DeVane. Um, and my presentation is going to be very, very succinct, and then I will hand over to Professor Christopher Kojzar. Um, I wanted to just start from a point which is very simply made, that Oletha DeVane's work is very inspired by her journeys and her travels. I don't mean that singularly or individually, because many of us go on vacation, but I mean that by um, by beginning there, I mean to invoke the legacy of African American artists over more than a century, who have also pursued different facets of travel. I won't name them because we know who they are. Um, but I wanted to start there. And one of the um, quotes, I believe, um, that Oletha DeVane has given talks about Thailand in particular, and as that being the inspiration for the spirit houses from 2014. But this piece specifically that we're looking at was, of course, inspired by Harriet Tubman, and I was really drawn to it because I think the assumption is when African American artists leave the United States that they're not thinking about the US. That this means that in some ways it becomes a rupture in their thinking, but actually that is far from the truth. As we see from Driscoll, it just begins a complete re-education of those artists about the United States specifically, taking into account what has happened elsewhere. So in 2019, and I found this piece really in an article that Angela Carroll wrote called Dark Things Matter, which was a review of an exhibition at Project 1628.
Mm-hmm.
And this work really stood out for its focus on Harriet Tubman. And I really was interested in, shall I say, the attunement to Black politics in the United States, basically thinking about the social and also social political realities. These are things that Professor Leslie King Hammond describes in her essay, albeit very differently, I think. Um, but I was really, really interested in how Oletha DeVane deals with the memory of abolitionist Harriet Tubman. Obviously, her life intersected with Baltimore. So we do see a kind of close to home, something very close to home as well there, a sort of very strong correlation with Baltimore as well as with the history of abolitionism. And I think these to engage this work specifically, um, coming after talking about Driscoll and other artists who have gone to Africa, gone to Nigeria and other places, is to really reinforce the fact that these artists begin to look at Black politics differently, begin to look at the legacy of African American people quite differently, and here quite sharply. Next slide, please. Um, this is also a work called to freedom. I believe there's another, either a panel or a similar panel called Migration, and it just alludes similarly to those movements. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here I was really interested in this work. I mean, it is a very, very striking piece. I was really trying to understand questions of what Oletha DeVane calls spiritual essence. I was trying to understand the artist's e- experimentation, of course, following Professor Leslie King Hammond's writing as well. And I was trying to understand how different facets or different traditions sort of come together. So here, the Greek chronos alludes to Greek literature and philosophy, such as in Songs of Orpheus. No, sorry, Songs of Orpheus is an actual work. I'm sorry, but in this work, still we see that allusion to Greek literature and philosophy. But at the same time, we see an allusion to Papa Legba, from who is a Haitian deity. And so there is this kind of conversation that brings different traditions or different faiths and different spiritualities, spiritual traditions together. That is something I was really, really drawn to and very interested in. And so I begin to define that as Oletha DeVane's pluralistic attitude when we think about Haitian Yoruba ontologies, in addition to Christian and Greek sources. That is something that is I found very notable. The next, the next slide. So I think I was really also drawn to the prevalence. I mean, I haven't written about this work in the essay, but when I looked at the catalog, this work really stood out to me. Um, a collaboration with the poet Donna Denise, and I thought I should include it in my slides because it refers again to the spiritual essence, but also it refers to the engagement with literature, specifically with poetry. And I think that's a very important aspect um, that I'm trying to put across in my essay, and how I think that Oletha DeVane has actually managed to make her work. I think literature has something to do with it. So this next slide, please. Yeah, and next slide. Thank you. And then next slide. Okay. So here I just want to basically talk a little bit more about what I feel is a quite prominent figure, Zora Neale Hurston, um, and the kind of relationship I feel between Zora Neale Hurston and Oletha DeVane. Give me a moment because this might be a bit more complex to draw out. Um, So the there are different aspects that I feel here. Zora Neale Hurston was an anthropologist who spent a lot of time traveling in the Caribbean, but also in Haiti. Her anthropology um, was very much about collecting folkloric narratives, trying to understand the linguistic practices of Black people in the Caribbean and in North America. Um, but there is also something there where her artwork, meaning Zora Neale Hurston, now not as an anthropologist, but Zora Neale Hurston as an artist, as a writer, right, is very much borrowing from the folkloric narratives. And this is what Daphne Lamoth, um, herself an anthropologist, refers to as a sort of um, dual role, which is the role of, on the one hand, it's the role of the native informant. On the other hand, it's really the role of the scientist or the person studying the people. I mean, embodying both of these roles is something um, that we see in Zora Neale Hurston. Um, when it comes to Haiti and what Black traditions of revolt and rebellion mean, that political history is very little discussed in the United States, and to this day is very little known. I mean, we find this in far leftist corners of the academy, including with um, very few writers like Robin D.G. Kelly, among others.
Mm.
But it's only a very small portion of the academy that really recognizes that history of Black rebellion. Um, but that history, the Black radical tradition that is described by Fred Moten, that is described by Robin D.G. Kelly, informs the work of Zora Neale Hurston. And when we look at the novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, it's not just a sort of like, can I say, uh, classic text that is has become, iconic and has become praised by the likes of Oprah and has become a standard book in the curriculums and syllabuses. It is part of the Black radical tradition. Why is it part of the Black radical tradition? It is because of the way that Hurston's characters present themselves, the full range of the kind of folkloric and expressive work that is done in that novel represents Black people in a way that is very true to how those traditions operate. And so I really think that that is the connection that I'm making there between Hurston specifically and the Black radical tradition, I think. Um, but coming back to Oletha DeVane, I'm really interested in when Oletha DeVane talks about the fact that her art speaks. And I think this is very, very, very important for me. In the interview, I think it's a conversation with Virginia Anderson, where Oletha DeVane talks about, I, I put together materials for their language. They speak to each other, right? That is something I find to be intentional, right? um, Black people in the United States for a long time were denied the opportunity to write, to think for themselves. And so invoking language and invoking speech is a very important thing for an African American person. And so thinking about it in the context of the materials that are being used in an artwork is very, very, very important. Um, and so, whether we think of um, Zora Neale Hurston, I'm going to go back and forth as pushing the limits which is a lot of what the critics at the time said. Alain Locke specifically was um, borderline offensive about Zora Neale Hurston's novel and
Mhm.
her novels, basically um, decrying the aesthetic language, which I understand and which many historians of literature understand to be part of that Black radical tradition, right? In which Black people are loud, in which Black people suck their teeth, in which Black people kick down doors, in which Black people are not afraid to say certain things and do certain things. Um, I think that this is um, something that I think might be described as excessive, but again, following Dr. Leslie King Hammond, who talks about the idea of seemingly useless stuff, right, as an personalized artistic vocabulary. I think this is important for me to take a leaf from Dr. Leslie Hammond and to think about Oletha DeVane's desire to speak through her work as also being loud and errant and excessive, right? I had a lot of conversations with contemporary artists who I know, and I sent them, of course, your work, Oletha. Some of them had never really encountered it before, and many of them found it very, very difficult.
Yeah.
They found it very difficult. It's not very easy to discern the meaning of the work, and it is really it comes with a gut punch. And so I just want to end with the fact that I do think that for me, one of the lessons that I've taken from Oletha DeVane's work is that it is unafraid to invoke these traditions that are African American, that are Caribbean, and that it is loud, it is errant, it is boisterous, it is all those things that I think contemporary aestheticians, including Alain Locke, might not have necessarily embraced. So thank you so much, Oletha DeVane, for making this very powerful work. And yeah, now I
Thank you
pass.
so much. Thank you so much, Moses. That's wonderful. And now we go on to Christopher Kojzar, who has collaborated with Oletha DeVane on several public commissions and has eloquently written about those experiences in the catalog. Please take it away, Christopher.
Thank you so much. It was really enjoyable to hear you, Serubiri, talk about the work and come from an outside perspective. This has been such it's a very, for me, it's a very familial thing. I mean, Aletha's my mom, obviously. In this context, it kind of, I'm coming from the almost like the home looking outward into
Yes,
the art world and hearing from, outside looking in, it gives a lot of perspective. So that the loud and the boisterousness and the unabashed, you know, nearness to anything that is light or knowledge or
yes,
it shines through, I think, in
yes,
in her work. and
yes, it does.
um and I want to kind of like, I guess, pivot to this, what is the public art component. So I'm speaking from a very familial place. It's not I've created this slideshow or this presentation in a way not to link it to a broader art world, but also to look in, to see the process that comes around in creating these pieces. There's a history in it. I've seen my mom's work evolve over the decades. There was a public art piece that's touched upon in the end of the writing that I do. It was a small piece at an elementary school, and it was very profound. I think I saw my mom work on that and have a sense of a different sense of spatial recognition than she usually has with her studio work, and there seemed to be a different leap intellectually, in her curious nature and in resolving what happens in the studio as opposed to what happens in a public facing environment. You can go to the next slide, and I just want to touch upon how we collaborate and also how my mom works. She's coming from a place where she's looked at ancestry throughout a lot of her work, going back to even religious deity, but also thinking about the Black experience through history. And we always, I remember growing up, I mean, her work, there was a turn, there was this darkness that was happening in around, I'd say like the early 90s. There was a switch from abstract expressionism to more figurative work, and it was dark. Like the work had there was a meaning behind it, and there was something that was unsettling in finding what that search was for. She was contemplating a lot, it seems. So when we got this commission in Lexington Market, it all stemmed from a dark period in American history, and recognizing where people stood in relation to other people in spaces in Baltimore. And it took a few meetings to really, or actually a lot of meetings, to address the visuality that was happening, because the work came from, and even with the McDonough Memorial, it came from a place of not knowing what these people look like, or having very little historical knowledge on where how we could recognize them. So in looking at the Robert and Rosetta piece in Lexington Market that went up in 2022, the visuals stem from both Oletha's studio practice, and also a recognition of how to uphold uh, the Black body in spaces to be, larger than life. I think with Robert and Rosetta, these are people that don't have much about them, in terms of written narrative or written. There's no registry really, except for these articles that came out of the Baltimore Sun and the Commercial Daily Advertiser at the time. So I think that when we started this work, it was really like a bouncing off ideas between the history of the neighborhood, which was dubbed the Iron Neighborhood of Baltimore. There was a lot of iron work, and that iron work is seen it's like dotted throughout the city as recognizable to the stoops, to the doors, to even older buildings. And uh, in doing these designs, I think there is, in accessing that darkness, there is a lightness that comes from my mom's ability to think about things in a playful manner. So I see there's a lot of play that happens with material, and I think that in designing just these pieces, it goes on to thinking about, okay, how will I incorporate beads, or how will I incorporate pattern, or how will I incorporate my hand in something that I have to communicate to with the fabricators. You can go to the next slide. The beadwork that comes apart in these pieces, it's really just her in the studio hand painting the work, working with the fabricator to come up with ideas of how to really show her hand. The design element is really uh, it's a bouncing of ideas, and you can actually go to the next slide, between family members. So the ornate pattern on the left is my sister's, the one in the middle is mine, and the one on the right is my mom's. And these patterns, these elements get pared down in a way through discussions over a kitchen counter table, or over the phone, or in person, where we try to mitigate some kind of like balance between what is aesthetically pleasing, but also might have some sort of conceptual relation to a larger narrative. So all this stuff in some way was incorporated in the final piece of Robert and Rosetta, but what I mean to say by this is that I think my mom is always trying to find meaning in every little bit of an artwork. So every little bead, every little piece of glass, every face, every formation of the clay, there's a piece of meaning uh, put underneath. And I think with the public art, it becomes more about um, maybe some dialogue that's happening between family and also uh, with what's public facing. And you can go to the next slide. So I think that even in looking at her initial designs, like this one on the right, and the final painting that happens after the fabricator, who is Nick Irace for this piece, develops the piece in metal and steel. Um, that conversation we try to maintain, or I think my mom tries to maintain a very like I want to say intuitive process, but also a very it's not just intuitive. I think it's almost like um the way to claim ownership in this is larger than ourselves. So in trying to find a message in it, it's getting away from, you know, whose hand is in this piece, or who, it's more about who is this piece about, and how do we recognize something that's larger than the actual than the artist that's creating it. So um I guess I might be going a little off topic here, but I think that what I mean to say is a lot is maybe thrown into into the sink, and then we see what sticks and what doesn't. You can go to the next slide. And it's seen here, like these are some of the initial designs of a piece that we really threw a lot at it. Luckily, it didn't have a budget to get to this point. I mean, it's still very wonderful, but you know, it's a play. I think there's a hope to have something that's there's a bunch in here that really just has a lot of meaning in it, and taking things out. Was part of the process. The heart, there's a heart panel. You can't quite see it in the middle, but it goes back to a lot of the formations in her spirit sculptures and her paintings. Yeah, the Haitian work, the Haitian callbacks. It's there, just never got realized in this piece due to the budget. But you can go to the next slide. So we land on pieces like this, and I think that as we collaborate together, and as it looks at her work in the past and our work in the future, or my work in the future, it's the semblance that happens in creating this is um, it's powerful as like a place to come from for as an artist, and also um you know, as someone who might just pass by it. I think with Oletha's work in studio, there's there's this bricolage technique that Lowery hits upon in in the catalog, and there is a continuation of this on a level that's, I think, um, just rather like she's my mom, I think, is very good at creating something and knowing when to stop and to take away stuff at the same time, even though her pieces are very like there's a lot of embellishment, there's a lot of filigree that happens in this piece. There's a paring down that I think she's very quite astute at doing through years of being an artist, of being an educator, of being around other artists. That constant conversation that she's having with her community, with her friends in the Baltimore scene, has really helped her kind of like establish a distinct look. We can go to the next slide. As we look forward, I wanted to talk about this piece, even though it's not even, it hasn't been, it's not in the catalog. It's not even, we haven't even, the ink's not even wet on the contract, but it's a piece that started with this tool. And this is a lens flipper that is a predated tool. It's not really, it's defunct. It's not really in use that much in the United States. But we were invited to apply to a call about an ophthalmologist who lost his land through discriminatory land laws, specifically eminent domain laws, that his land was taken away from him from the city. This is a black ophthalmologist. And was taken away from him by the city because they didn't want any black people living in the neighborhood in this newly founded or newly established town of Creve Coeur. And he was a well-respected man in his career. He was a musician, Dr. H. Philip Venable. And Dr. Venable lived a very passionate and upstanding life. And it wasn't until after his death that the city of Creve Coeur recognized a need to maybe right a wrong to address his success, his permanence as a well-respected individual of the St. Louis, Missouri city, region. You can go to the next slide. So, in taking that one tool, I remember having this conversation with my mom, and I'm very precise, and as we operate in this boundary of creating stuff and conceptual artwork, it was how does this tool represent this man, or how does this tool act as a portal or as a gateway or as a way to pass through the really ugly history of what's behind it all. And it all starts with these drawings. I'm showing drawings as a way to kind of show the napkin ideation that's happening, right? The beginning phase, because there's all these other phases where there's sculpting involved, there's a digital aspect that's involved, there's conversations that are involved. And as we recognize the process, I feel like the process is just as important as the final step. And in showing this piece, I'm just kind of giving you an idea of where it starts, and you can go to the next slide. And where it develops through drawing a call and response between myself and my mom. This is one of my drawings based on one of her previous drawings. And you can go forward again. And another drawing, that's another call and response that happens. You can go forward again. And this is displaying conversations that happened about spirals and about what it means to access things as a wayfaring concept through a particular design. You can go to the next slide. And where Oletha is pulling her knowledge from Robert Farris Thompson, from what she has in her knowledge base that kind of like draws upon something bigger out of Thompson's book, thinking about the Congo spiral, thinking about how this relates more to a universal symbol around spirituality or around knowledge building or around finding oneself. And you can move forward again to be realized as something that might stand in public space, right? And working with each other to say, okay, this is where we know we need to get to, and we have a place of defining these specific little tools, these symbols, to make it something larger. You can go to the next slide. So again, it's continuing this narrative of how do we take these objects and really like expand on them, embellish them. One thing that my mom kept on saying was like, I want glass in this project. I was like, there's no way glass is going to work. And then it's like, oh wait, there is a way glass is going to work. So let me shut up for a second and listen to my elder as we like collaborate on this process. And the funny thing is, it's like a lot of people propose stuff like this nowadays. It's like using elements that might be attractive to the eye. You can go to the next slide. As opposed to something that's so stayed and thinking about just figurative work or thinking about
right.
Anyway, so my time might be out. Is my time out, Lowery?
Your time, yes, it's time to give
right.
seed to your mom.
Then I'll cede to her. That's it. That's all I got.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christopher.
Wow.
It was fabulous.
Wow. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah.
Thank you.
So now we're going to cap off the evening with hearing from the artist.
First of all, I want to not only tell you how much I appreciate your contributions to this whole process. I want to thank Lowery for sending me up to the attic to pull down everything that I could possibly create and really try to narrow it down to an exhibition that had over 100 pieces in it. So the fact that she was able to really focus on not so much a linear place in terms of where I came from, but thematically. Uh, Serubir, you hit the nail on the head for me for your really your response to how the changes that take place within the African American spirit, going places, trying to understand not only my place in the world, but how is it that I relate to others? You know, it's always been about that for me. I think that is our spiritual journey, that we are to come to a point where we understand how to live together. And when Christopher is working with me, I'm so amazed at his skill with regards to, he's right, we're different. We're different in many ways, but it's a really joyous kind of difference once we get to that project and it's complete, you know, in terms of its drawing. I think he has this ability to um, conceptualize in ways that, you know, brings me back to this notion of um, how work is different in terms of the digital world. I'm not a digital person, you know, but I do believe that materials are incredibly important. That to me is the signature of how we not only sense, because we are sentient beings who have this need to touch or to smell or to see. So my whole issue about art making a lot of times is it's a very collaborative process, very collaborative. And it's a collaborative process when I'm working with my son who is, you know, an artist, or my daughter who's another kind of artist, or my husband who was a contractor. You know, to me it's all collaborative. Um, I find that to be a very important part of a practice as well. And the only way you get public art done is through a collaborative process. Um, the thing that really moves me sometimes is thinking about how do I convey to a public not only the history of the African American experience, but how is it that it's faced in the world? Because we have come to these shores many times with our spirit intact, and it's been taken away to be made uh, unrecognizable in some cases. Um, and I always want to be able to find that origin. To me, it's about our origin. How is it that we not only look at the whole spiritual realm, but what are the origins when we're talking about coming out of Africa? It had to have followed us somewhere throughout the world. And this whole notion of being able to look at various and different societies and realize that through line of that seeking, that to me is what the business of being on this planet is about, that we're all seekers, right? We all come to a point in our history that history is going to take us a little bit further into knowing each other. And as we move through a world that is so fraught with disorganizing and hatred and racism, understanding where we are historically is incredibly important, because we will never, ever be able to move forward or we will destroy our planet if we don't come to a point where we understand who we are as human beings. That's what I believe. So I so appreciate Dr. Hammond, Leslie King Hammond. I so appreciate my woman sitting next to me, Dr. Lowery Sims. I so appreciate is it Dr. Moses?
Mhm.
There you go. I think Tadia Rice, who I hope is on the call, she says she was coming from Hawaii. I know the time difference in Hawaii. So the fact that she is my partner, on many occasions we've known each other for 15 years, to work with her on Beyond Bars was truly a lesson in acceptance and collaborations and compassion. All those things are part of where we need to be. Christopher, thank you so much, truly, for being my son.